finishing off your moccasins or putting on the cuff. You can just put your cuff on straight with no modifications. However, I'm going to show you how to get a little bit fancy with your cuff. So if you want to get a little bit fancy, take your pen or marker and make a little line on the bad side of your moccasin. Take your scissors and cut little fringes right to where your line is. Keep your fringes even and straight. There's no measuring really, it's just eyeballing it so that they're relatively the same size width, and you're just going up to the line that you created and keeping your top straight. You do this before you sew them. That way you can keep them straight, keep them even. It gets a little harder to do after it's already sewed on. So this is my first part, and of course I do this all the way down until I'm at the end of the cuff. You want to keep it fairly even, fairly straight, so that you have a fancier moccasin. Like I said, you don't have to do this. You can also do it straight. You can also trace the exact same size in rabbit fur or beaver fur and make a fur-lined moccasin as well. So once I have it cut so that it's nice and fancy like this, I'm going to take my finished moccasin and I'm actually going to put the good side, so this is my good side, facing down. So I should have my bad side on the outside. And so this is my bad side. And when I sew this, when I'm finished, I'm actually going to flip it out this way. This is why we want the good side on the inside. And so the last stitch that you have to practice is your blanket stitch. So the very last stitch that you're going to do is your blanket stitch. And so we're going to start with the blanket stitch, and the blanket stitch is similar to the whip stitch. It's a very easy stitch. It's used for putting two pieces of cloth together. So I am going to take my needle with the knotted end. I'm going to put it on the top, and I'm going to start my cuff right at the edge of my moccasin. And so you can see that I've left no space here, that I'm not starting it way over here. I'm not starting it way over here. I'm starting at the edge where my beadwork is. With all of our sewing, we start and end with our 3 times around in the same spot. So 1, 2, 3. So with the blanket stitch, I like to work from in the farther left corner and go left to right. That's my own preference from the outside. The reason I do that is because I can hold the thread in my left hand. I can take a little bite with my thread pointing, with my needle pointing upwards of the material. I put my needle through both sides and I pull. And when I pull, I make sure that I am going through a loop each and every time. So my thread is here in my finger. I take my needle, I'm pointing it upwards, and I'm going directly straight up so that my needle and my thread form a loop. So every single time my needle and my thread are going to form a loop. Make sure as you're going that you keep your stitches small, keep your stitches even, and keep your stitches tight. When I pull them tight, they retract into the leather so that you barely see them. You want your stitches small and you want your stitches tight. This is what I'm looking for when I'm marking your assessment. I will be looking to see that each one of them is locked on the top. If they are not locked, this stitch is not locked, my needle is not going through it. The easiest way to lock your stitch when you see that it's going like this is just to put your needle through the stitch. Your needle should always be through that stitch, so if you forgot to go through it, just go up and go through so that it locks that stitch. So here I'm going from the back instead of the front. If I go through the back instead of the front, then my stitch does not lock. If you go through the front, your stitch should lock. So I've gone through the back instead of the front. The easiest way to fix it is to go through that loop, which then causes a lock on the stitch. So that's it. You'll go all the way around. When you go all the way around, you finish with 3 times around on the end, and you should be able to flip them like this. If you've done your blanket stitch properly and it's small with no big spaces, when you flip it like this, you should not be able to see the thread. So if I pull this like this and I flip it, you cannot see my thread. So if you keep it even and well stitched, tiny, you shouldn't see the thread as you go through. And that is how you make your moccasins.